Well, hello, everyone. I want to just greet you as people are listening in from all of our sites and everybody who's on our email distribution list receiving this email that is videotaping three of us. So I want to just introduce the panel that's here. I'm Bruce Enns, as you know, lead pastor of Forest Grove Community Church. And with me today is Sue Enns. And Sue is our director of operations, and she's been on staff for this last year and is newer to our staff. And so she'll be sharing today. And also Jim Davidson. And Jim is the chair of our board, or what we refer to as the moderator of our council, our leadership council of the church. So welcome, Jim and Sue. And it's good to have you here for this update to our church. So what we want to do today, the purpose of this video is to do three things. We want to, first of all, do a financial update on the church in terms of giving and where our operating budget is at. Secondly, we want to update you as a church on decisions related to the budget reductions and some of the actions that have been taken related to the implications of the COVID-19 crisis. And then thirdly, we want to explain two motions that require congregation approval. And we'll also outline the process of that electronic vote that is going to happen here in the next week. So first of all, we want to go into the financial giving update. And Sue, we'll start with you. You work closely with Anna Robinson, who's our accountant, and I know that you've been watching our giving patterns closely over the past weeks. And so why don't you just describe a little bit about what's happening in our financial giving to the church during this time?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Anna Robinson and we together oversee just the budget, and she lets me know the numbers of what's going on. And it has been a bit of a hard spell here, as in March, when we were not meeting for the month of March, for the second half of March, we saw a significant drop in our giving. Basically, every Sunday morning, we bring in between our three sites about $20,000 to $25,000. And we noticed that that was approximately the amount that was missing from our income in those three weeks at the end of March. So our hope was that it was just people were figuring out how they could give during this time of not meeting. And thankfully, now that we are into April and we're seeing a bit of a rebound, we're feeling a little bit of an ease. We have seen for the month of April, for the first half, a good chunk come in. We were down in giving about 50%, and now for the month of April, we have received about 50% of what we budget for our monthly income. We usually budget around $155,000 to $160,000 per month, and we have received almost half of that this month. And so we are feeling a bit better, but obviously that was a decrease in March, and we're not sure if we'll recover from that. And we also are just really thankful for our congregation in how they have stepped up and just figured out new ways to give, because this is totally different for everybody. People are giving. We have a company that does online giving called Tithely, and people have been using that. There is also, you can do it through your online banking. People have been mailing checks. So it has been just super encouraging and heartwarming just to see how our congregation has pulled together. But also, we need to be living in this time with wisdom, and we need to realize that there probably will be a drop in income as well. And even just with our rental properties, there'll be a bit of a drop there too. So yeah, so that's kind of where we're at in the income side of things.
So Sue, that's really encouraging, just to get a sense that in many ways the giving is rebounding and people are responding strongly and finding new ways to give online. And so we all want to say thank you to all of you for giving generously. And that's really, really good news. Jim, good to have you with us today. Thanks for the good job you do of leading our council. And I just wanted to ask you a little bit about our giving as well too, and just the importance of people continuing to worship through giving, especially when we have money in the bank from our land sale. We're going to be talking about that in a little bit further on, about these motions that we have. But can you describe the difference between how we think about our operating budget and how we think about the money from our land sale, and the importance for people to continue giving today?
Sure. Thanks, Bruce. And I would like to also just thank our congregation for their the way that they have adapted to the environment we're currently in. And Bruce and I have a role in the Canadian Conference, and we're hearing stories, all sorts of stories. And we just feel so blessed being part of Forest Grove, of the 3 congregations. And again, we're not surprised, and we're just blessed and thankful that people have stepped up. We are blessed in a second way is when we sold our property east of the church, we were able to recognize some funds. And sometimes that's can be a double-edged sword when it comes to the idea of worshiping by giving, that people can feel that there's money in the bank, and we no longer have to give as much or as often or at all to the church. However, those funds are restricted, and we've set those funds aside to really support different kinds of ministry under what we've called the 100 times vision. So those are segregated funds in an internally restricted reserve, which means that it takes council permission to use them. But our operating funds really are the funds that keep our ministries going on a day-to-day basis, keep our church going on a day-to-day basis, and actually pay our staff and photocopiers and everything else that it takes to run our church on a day-to-day basis. So they are 2 separate funds. Although there is money in the bank account, we do not look from an operating standpoint that we have access to the restricted reserve.
No, that's great. Thanks, Jim. And we'll come back to that conversation in a little bit. As you mentioned, the 100 times vision and just some of the things council's thinking about and praying about related to that. We'll come back to that in a little while. But let's move to the second area where it talks about, we want to talk about COVID-19 budget reductions and some of the related decisions that as staff and also as council we're making together. And, we've taken a multi-step approach to decision making related to this COVID crisis. We've wanted to walk this out slowly and not make rash decisions. We've had extra staff meetings with our lead team, and I'll just let the congregations know again. Our lead team is our 3 site pastors, so Kevin and Nathan and Brian, and Marianne, our missions pastor, and myself. And then we also connect with Sue on a regular basis as she gives support to our lead team as well. And so we've had a number of meetings, and then I know there's been extra council meetings. But Sue and Jim, what if you just comment for a minute on some of the processes from perspective of how we approach some of the decisions that we're making at this time?
I'll go first, Jim. Sure. So we have been just looking at the realities of what COVID-19 will mean for the income side, and the reality is we're living in this tension right now where we look at our economy and we look at the loss in rental income, and we have to balance living in faith that God will provide, but also being wise and prudent with how we manage our money right now. And so we did many things of asking our staff to look at every budget line and see where they can cut, where they can freeze spending. They did quite a few areas were able to be reduced there. And we also have made some adjustments to our staff. We did temporarily lay off one of our custodians. We also cut one of our admin positions that we're currently hiring for. We were able to just cut it down to a part-time position right now. So there's been some things there where we've saved a bit of money. And we're just looking for ways everywhere we can where we make sure that we do not go over budget and we're living within our means.
It's good. What about for you, Jim?
Well, I think one good thing that has occurred from my predecessors is we have a governance model that we're using, which has really helped us, I think really has helped us in these times of upset conditions where council has asked Bruce and Sue and all of the staff to have a look at, what are the opportunities? What are the things that are going on in the church from the revenue side? And what can be done to mitigate on the spending side? And it has been really, for myself as moderator, I've been very thankful that Bruce and Sue and the staff have been able to take that on without the need of council getting their hands on this on a day-to-day basis. But what they do is they come back to us, and we've had 3 meetings now that we've been talking about the plan. And the plan has been, as Bruce mentioned, we've taken an approach where we want to be able to make sure we're responsible to be good stewards of what's been provided. And those are the donations that you as congregants provide to us each and every week as we move forward. And our job is to take those funds and to be able to spend them wisely on the budget lines that have been approved by the congregation. And so staff has gone and looked at what are the essentials, what are the things that we must do, how do we best take care of you, the congregation, in the ministries we have, how do we take care of our staff, and how do we take care of our facility. And so they have done an excellent job. Council has pushed back. We've asked all sorts of questions to Bruce and to Sue, and Anna was there in the meetings as well of have you thought about this, have you thought about that? And I've been very impressed with the way we've approached this. I do not feel that we have made any irrational decisions or have overreacted. I think we've reacted appropriately to the conditions, and we will, over the course of the next few months, continue to monitor and, again, make adjustments as necessary.
That's great. Thanks, Jim. And I know it's been great working with council on this as staff. We've really appreciated that. Sue, why don't you speak to, we've gone through and worked through a whole budget reduction process, and what do you talk about how much was reduced through that? With that, I know that, as Jim was indicating, we've looked at every option, everything's on the table. We've looked at reduction in staff salaries, we've looked at layoffs, and we've taken certain paths, but we've looked hard at the budget reduction side of things. Why don't you speak to that part of it?
Sure. So thankfully, with our staff involvement and cutting out as much as we can out of our budget, I should actually maybe just clarify that our budget year goes till June. And so we're talking about these next 3 months, how we're managing April, May, and June. And so we will start to look at the next budget year and start planning for that down the road. We are going to put that on pause for a little bit. But right now we're just focusing on this budget year and making sure that we're being wise with this budget year. Some of the things, we were able to cut out $200,000 from our operational budget, just from staff. A lot of it is just freezing our spending. We're not going to do the things that we had planned on doing, as well as, and in cutting out our ministry stuff, but it also unfortunately means there's a slight decrease to each of our partner agencies and our conference giving. We decided to include that in the cuts. We looked at staff salaries, but there's also government wage subsidies that we can apply for. And in looking at that, there's a significant portion of money that if we were able to receive that benefit, then we will be able to get, it looks like around $120,000 from the government to subsidize our wages. And so we would much rather, the whole point of that wage subsidy is to keep people employed. And so we would much rather keep people fully employed and go that route. And so that is the plan right now. We will keep making adjustments as needed, but that's our plan for that. And then we have another bit of reduction that we'll talk about in one of the motions that we want to make, but we can talk about that a little bit later. One of the things that I feel like is worth mentioning is just, we're talking about this very starkly, but just to know that we know that there is lives and ministries that are affected by these decisions, and we don't take the decisions lightly. They have been difficult ones to make.
Thanks, Sue. And I know, just speaking from the staff side, as I've been watching and observing the staff, just been so encouraged how staff have continue to engage. And Jim mentioned that already. And it's just been there hasn't been a shortage of work. It's been ramped up for most, and just trying to get things online and stay connected. And so really appreciate the way that staff is engaging. So thank you, Sue, for your good work in that area. And we're encouraged by the way that we could kind of land here on this. Would it be accurate to say, I'll just pose it to the two of you, that our hope and our goal still is to end the year in the black, that we wouldn't have a deficit budget? Is that fair to say, or how would you respond to that?
I think in the discussions we've had, Bruce, ideally we would like to be able to come out with a positive balance for the 2019-2020 fiscal year. There's still many unknowns. The trend that we're seeing at the beginning of April certainly gives us encouragement that potentially we can not have a deficit at the end of the year.
Well, let's move into the last section, which is just two motions that we want to put forward to the congregation for electronic voting. And this is a unique time. Our plan was to have a congregations meeting at the end of March, or March 22nd to be precise. And we announced that, and then we had to delay, obviously, that because we weren't able to meet at that time. But now there are a few motions that we need to bring to the congregations electronically. And so we have provision for that, and we want to utilize that. And so we want to explain what these motions are. And so first of all, the first one is related to the repair of our roof. But this relates to using money from our green space funds, or from what is now our internally restricted funds. And Jim, can you just give us a little bit of a timeline again of the sale of this land in recent months, and what's been done with the money so far, and how much remains in our account before we get into the specifics of these motions?
Sure. Well, as was brought forward at our June meeting, our congregational meeting, we had an offer of sale for the property on the east side of the church. At that particular time, we were not sure what the closing date would be. There were a number of conditions that had to be met. We did close the sale in November of 2019 and received the funds at that particular time. In October, or in our fall congregational meeting, we proposed to the congregation that we use some of the net proceeds from the sale of that property to repay our debt with the Canadian Conference. And so we have done that, and that includes the cost of the loan for the Attridge property, the Northside property, as well as the renovations that were done in 2018, 2019. And after making that payment, we ended up with a balance roughly around $2 million, which has now been invested at a competitive rate of interest. So we are getting some interest on those funds. One of the situations that did occur was, and we made the comment in our budget presentation for our 2020 budget, that we did not include any budget line items for payments of principal and interest because we weren't sure. We were hopeful that perhaps the deal would close by the end of July or August, and it actually went to the end of November. So we did incur some unbudgeted costs in our 2020 budget for that. In addition, in our fall meeting, we did pass a motion that we would use some of those proceeds from the internally restricted reserve to pay for lighting and some parking costs on the 33 parking stalls that are part of the sale that we retained. So there will still be some money coming out of that, but it's still going to be just a little under the $2 million mark that's sitting in that account.
Great. Thanks, Jim. We paid off our mortgage, and we are mortgage free, which is great. We've approved already the work on the parking lot and the lighting that has to happen. And then the two motions today are one you already alluded to, which we'll come back to, the principal and interest for our loan repayment. And Sue, why don't you talk about the first motion about the repairing our roof in our Attridge building, and just speak about the motion and why is repairing the roof important at this time?
Sure. So the motion that we have before you is that Forest Grove Community Church hires Flynn Group of Companies to repair our Attridge Building's roof using up to $200,000 from the internally restricted reserves to finance the repairs. And if any of you have been in our Attridge building in the last couple of years, when there has been snow melting or a rain, you have seen the need for something to be done with our roof. It has amped up over the last year or two, and this year especially. I've had videos from Curtis sent to me of the water coming in significant portions, coming down through the walls and soaking into our carpets. And so it has become less of a maintenance and more of a emergency repair that is needed to happen right now. 7 or 8 years ago, we had some roof work done. And so some of you may be wondering what the history is there. And the company that did the roof inspection and the maintenance, they did it according to the plans that we had. But since then, what's happened is our roof membrane has failed. And so some of that was due to some of the work that they did. They didn't actually do any mistakes, but they some of the work that they did, we did settle with the company because they recognized that some of it may have caused some of the failure of this membrane. And that settlement has given us $35,622. That's earmarked in our operational funds right now for repairs. But over and above this, now the repairs that are needed are about $185,000 total. And we were able to get 4 different quotes. When I say we, I should say Jim Siemens and Ken Wilms are the 2 main people that have worked on this for years. They know our roof so well and have done a huge effort in making sure that this gets done. And so they have been working. They got 4 quotes. We looked through those quotes. We gave a recommendation to council on which one looked like the best, most economical option, as well as the most likely to repair all of the problems. And so that's now what we're bringing towards the congregation to get this fixed to be done.
Thanks, Sue. So I know that council has really weighed in on this and worked hard at trying to figure out what's the best for the congregation and what's the best process to go through. And so, Jim, do you want to speak to that a little bit about, I know council looked at different options. I mean, we could use the money from the sale of the land, or we could do other things. What options has council looked at and how have they weighed this?
Well, I guess one of the underlying thoughts that council has had as we made the activity to move the funds into an internally restricted fund was that ideally they would be used more for ministry and non-operational type transactions. Really, we are not in an operating cash position that we have an extra $200,000 sitting in the bank account. We did discuss the option of perhaps going to a financial institution and borrowing the money. However, the difference between what we're earning and what we'd be paying interest is, we probably didn't think would be a prudent use of money. So kind of the decision that council made that at this time, it may be the most practical solution to ask the congregation to approve that we transfer $200,000 from the internally restricted reserve into our operating fund to pay for these roof repairs.
That's great. Thanks, Jim. So that's the first motion, is to use some of those funds for the roof repair. The second motion, Sue, do you want to read the second motion? And then Jim was just going to give some further explanation. He alluded to it earlier, but just to give a little bit more explanation of what it's for.
Sure. So the second motion is to transfer $45,800 from our internally restricted reserves to our operational account to cover the cost of extra loan payments from July to November 2019.
This is a motion that council discussed, and really what this is is just to cover the unbudgeted transactions that we mentioned of making the payments of principal and interest on our existing loans up to the middle of November. There was some discussion, I believe, when the budgets were presented and at the June congregational meeting that, we would look at the situation at the end of June to make a decision of whether or not we would be in a position to have some earnings, interest earnings on these invested funds that we could use potentially to offset this deficit. Council looked at this and thought about the practicality of having a deficit this year, or trying to take the opportunity to end up with a balanced budget and kind of get a brand new footing for the 2021 budget going forward. And so after significant discussion, some of us on council changed our minds a number of times of what was the most appropriate, we did reach the consensus that we thought that this would be an appropriate use of this money going forward. And then going forward, the thought was that we would be sitting there with probably around $1.7 million, just for rough numbers, that we would really then lean into on our 100 times vision. There is a tremendous understanding of mission and ministry and all sorts of just great and wonderful ideas. And what we're trying to do now is develop a process of how do we go ahead and use these funds to really invest in this 100 times vision. So this was part of the decision that council made when we made this motion, was that we could do this, and we would still remain with 1.7 million potentially available, and that would kind of give us a clean slate for a number of things, and then we could move forward.
Thanks, Jim. No, and I agree. I've been really encouraged by council's desire to really discern how to be a generous church and how do we utilize this money for greatest kingdom impact, and recognizing that it requires congregational approval. And that's why even with these motions, we're coming to the congregation for a vote, and we will with subsequent ideas and motions from council of how to utilize the money in generous ways, as what Jim is talking about. So that'll come at a future time. So Sue, we've got the two motions in front of us. Explain the process of what happens in the next week. How do people engage in this?
So as you said, these motions have been moved and seconded already by council. And so the process is that we will send out this communication. We will try and help people understand the thinking behind the motions. And then we will leave several days for communication back to us. People can email any one of us. I'll have their emails in the communication that I send out. And they can email us, ask questions, make comments. We want to kind of open the floor for discussion. And then on Friday, we will summarize the comments and questions that we've received and give some answers. And then we will call for a vote. So it will be with an online survey. You'll be able to vote on each of the motions. And then we will close the voting. We'll have it open over the weekend, and then we'll close it by Monday. And hopefully within a week, we'll be able to tell you whether these motions have passed or not.
That's great. And so this email today is going out widely. The email on Friday will just go to members, right?
Yes.
Because the people who are able to vote. So that'll be a more specific email list that'll go to members.
Yeah.
So as Sue mentioned, Jim and Sue and I are available, anybody on council actually, and for further comments or questions. Sue said our emails will be specifically on attached to this email that you're getting. So if you want to ask questions, we'll try to answer them or pass them on to the best person who can answer them. That's pretty much all we're going to do today. Sue and Jim, any last closing comments or things that you'd want to add to our conversation today?
I would just add on behalf of council that we're so encouraged with what we're seeing from our staff and all of those who are engaged with our ministries. And we've had a number of emails coming out and church services electronically. Council just is 100% supportive of the direction we're going. We're not sure at this point, whether this is a short-term, mid-term, long-term situation, but we do believe that we will get through it. we're comfortable in what's happening, and so we just ask that for your continued support, and certainly we're looking forward to conversations that we'll have on these two motions.
Thanks, Jim. Sue, any last comments from you?
Nothing for me. I think we're good. We were trying to keep this video short, so we got to keep wrapping it up, I think.
I think that's a cue that we're supposed to stop. We are so thankful for a God who is faithful, and we are walking in faith, and we are just really encouraged by the church. And so we just continue to say thank you for engaging. We ask you to engage in this process, and we just keep trusting God and leading us through this season. And we look forward to what God has in store for us. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Sue. We'll end for now.